Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. And do we have a creepy one for you today? We have doll stories, cowboy ghosts, and even a contest winner.
Sorry to intrude.
What's up, Sylvia?
Did you tell them that I'm on the show today?
I was about to. Sylvia is here for the 6th annual Ghost Stories with Sylvia, Volume 6. Is that crazy or what?
That's amazing.
It is. So let's do this and start with a very special 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. Act now and get a 20% discount on all your purchases using the promo code RONS. So head to GladysGoodies.com and get some swag for your dog today. Now for our mystery.
Hello. Yes, this is Dr. Fangfist. You again. Look here. Now you listen to me. You've shot me, then blown me up. Well, this just isn't cricket. What? Turn around? What for? Oh my. This is bloody going to hurt.
Hey, Chief, I rounded up all the cows, but none of them were talking. Sure was a mess. How our killer got a stampede into the house is, well, a real head-scratcher. I don't know if it's important or not, but I found this recording labeled Tom Williams and the Spooky Dog. How about I play it right now for you, Chief?
It is a strange world. After hearing my story about the Black Panther in the courtyard, my sister finally confessed to something that happened to her years ago. She did have a little dog at the time. She has 2 now. But as she was sitting on the sofa, she thought she heard the little dog coming into the room with the tip-tap of the little paws on the floor. And she expected it to come around to look at her, as he usually did. But what came by was something totally different. It was a almost transparent dog, woolly-haired and black in color. As the dog got past her, he turned around, looked at her, and grinned with human teeth. And then he proceeded on into the hallway, where he ultimately disappeared. So I thank my sister for this story, and it is a spooky one. Sincerely, Tom.
Wow, Chief, this guy really must tick somebody off, 3rd time and all. You know, I wonder if all the king's horses and all the king's men will be able to put him back together again this time. Guess we'll see.
Well, I didn't see that coming. Death by stampede. Someone was really out to get poor Dr. Fangfest, who is being played by our very own British guy. Thanks, British guy.
You are very welcome.
This 5-minute mystery was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. to say welcome to the month of spooky. Things are really rolling now. Some of you may have noticed that we're not following the plan that I laid out in the blog dated September 24th, 2019. Some logistical issues came up and the project was abandoned. However, it was replaced with a brand new plan. Each Tuesday during the month of spooky, a second podcast will be published. This is only for internet users. If you're listening to the show on the radio and want to hear these additional shows, you can. Just head to ronsamazingstories.com and they'll be waiting for you. These new shows will contain everything from stories Halloween past to brand new stuff. I hope you enjoy the extra spookiness. I'm still short a few stories for the month, so please, if you have any scary, horrific, or downright head-scratching stuff, we want to hear it. You can head to the main website and click on the story submission banner. If you want help writing your story, that's what I do, and I want to do it for you. We need your story. I received this email from the man with two first names, Daryl George. He writes, "Love the month of spooky, but I just have to ask, why not do this all year around?" Daryl, that is a great question. In fact, more and more we seem to be doing just that. But I, for one, like more than just paranormal type tales. In the future, maybe I will start just a paranormal podcast and have the flagship, Ron's Amazing Stories, continue on as it has. Who can say? I do know that I want to hear all kinds of stuff. So send in your crazy, funny, even heartwarming tales. It all counts towards the goal of presenting amazing stories. Now, let's get to why we're all here. Bring on the stories. Sylvia, is that the place?
That's it. It's even creepier than I remember.
Driver, pull up here. Now, Sylvia, I've got everything arranged, but what can you tell me about the place?
Well, in the early part of the 20th century, a family of 6 were slaughtered here in their beds by a crazed axe murderer.
That is creepy. Is this that Villisca place that we talked about before?
It sure is.
Well, let's get to it. I'm beginning to think this might be a bad idea. Now, I told my guy I would knock when we got here.
About bloody time you got here.
Sorry, British guy. We had trouble finding a cab that would take us out here. Is everything set up?
It certainly is, although I am not impressed. I have been here for at least 2 hours and not a spook in the place.
Sylvia?
Ghosts are fickle. They just won't perform for anyone.
Bloody hell, what was that?
I think they have decided to perform.
Guys, let's get to this. Cue the music. We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Shults is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and the spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. Well, Sylvia, I see you're all settled. You got your mic, and is that a ghost-proof headset? Very nice.
Latest technology.
Well, Sylvia, it is good to be back with you, and this truly is the spooky season.
This is my favorite time of the year. I love Halloween. I love the spooky season. Let's get to the stories.
All right. Well, the first thing we have to do is we got some old business from the last podcast. You know what I'm talking about?
We do. Yes,
the contest.
We do. Yeah, the contest.
Did we get a winner?
We certainly did. We had several people that sent in the right answer.
All right.
You know, I either need to make my multiple choice things a little more challenging, or I guess our listeners have really good Google foo.
Well, let me do this. Let me read the names of the folks who sent in correct replies.
Fantastic.
All right. We have Tim Starnes, Jandis Brendable, Scott Lloyd, Herman Peake, and Taylor Gordon. Guys, thank you for sending in your responses. Before we announce the winner, you told us that you were going to tell us the actual story. You going to do that for us right now?
I most certainly am. So, the ghost story is that the original owner of Punderson Manor on Kinsman Road in Geauga, Ohio, committed suicide in what has to be the most novel fashion that anyone could possibly think of. He was distraught over something, we don't know exactly what, but he decided to end it all. So what he did was he climbed into his bathtub and he set sail across his own ornamental lake. And when he got to the middle of the lake, he pulled the plug and the bathtub filled with water and sank and he drowned.
Wow. And this is all
Right.
confirmed. I actually looked this one up, and the police said it's one of the strangest suicides that they've ever had in that particular county.
He put a lot of thought into that. I mean, my goodness, what you're going to be talked about for years to come, that's for sure.
Well, Sylvia, of the 6 people I read, who won?
Our winner is Mr. Herman Peake.
And you had a chance to cross emails with him, I understand.
Yes, I let him know that his book was on the way. He won a signed copy of Fractured Souls, the new book about the Peoria State Hospital. And I let him know that it was coming, and he wrote back, and he was very excited, and he said, please tell Ron that his stories are amazing, and he can't wait for the next podcast.
Well, I am honored that he thought of me and even included me in that, so I'm pretty impressed. Well,
Yeah.
Sylvia, there were 4 people that sent in wrong responses.
Well, yeah,
And I think in all fairness, we should mention their names as well.
of course.
And those were Dora Perez, Cassandra Ramirez, Christopher Matthews, and I just have to read the actual email from this last one. The answer is totally wrong, but it was sent in by Linda Curry. She writes, "Hey, Ron, I think he did it with a roller coaster. It was the strangest of the bunch of options, and I know how strange Sylvia is. Just kidding, I think. I love the show and keep them coming. Oh, and to Sylvia, I have just begun reading your books. I don't know what order they should be read in, so I'm starting with demons. Thank you, Linda."
That is nice. Linda, thank you so much for your kind words. You actually don't have to read my books in any order. I just am glad that you're reading them. Thank you so much for letting me know about that. And please enjoy the books.
Maybe you should send her a copy. Just kidding. After all, she's reading them. I got to say, of all your books, Demons is the one that gave me the most trouble.
Really? Why's that?
I don't like reading about demons or even talking about them, to be honest. That's just my thing.
Yeah. And Ron, when I was approached to write that book, this was one of the very few books that someone actually approached me and said, I want you to write this particular book. This is one of the few times it's ever happened. And when she approached me about this and told me the story and told me that she wanted me to write about the demonic experiences she had had, I honestly didn't want to at first. I didn't want that kind of attention from the other side. I said, I'm really not sure about this. But the story this woman had was she was so sincere in her belief in what had happened to her that once she told me what she had experienced and that she wanted to share her experiences and let other people know that there was help out there, I, of course, had to write the story.
What is the actual name of the book again? It's
called Hunting Demons, a true story of the dark side of the supernatural.
Yeah, not my thing.
Yeah.
But it does take us into our next little subject here. And that is, we had an email from last time that we ducked the question. And we said that we would answer it this time. So I say we got to do it, right?
Let's do it.
All right. So here's the email. Hello, Ron. First, let me say what others have said. You have the most unique podcast out there. Your mix mash of stories is wonderful and fun to listen to. You asked, what is our favorite segment? For me, hands down, it's Ghost Stories with Sylvia. You guys seem to like each other and to have a lot of fun. I'm going to stop there for a second and say, like is a really strong word.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Just kidding. I do have a question for the both of you. Do you agree on what ghosts and spirits are? I'm betting this question is going to spark a debate. Jeanette Porter from Harwick, Pennsylvania. How do you want to attack this, Sylvia?
Jeanette, that was a lovely email, and we really appreciate you writing in and commenting on the show. And let's see, the question was, do we agree on what ghosts and spirits are? So, no. I'm kidding.
No, actually, you're right.
This is because we've talked about this, you and I, Ron, and it's pretty obvious that no, we don't actually agree, and that's fine. So let's talk about it. What is your opinion on what ghosts and spirits are?
Well, again, I've said this before. I have a very traditional background I was born, bred, and raised Lutheran, and for anyone to even talk about the possibility of there being ghosts and spirits is not something that was allowed. Ghosts, there are no ghosts, there are no spirits. And that's what basically I was raised to believe. But my view has changed so much. It's ever evolving. And I'm really more confused than I've ever been before. And here I thought maybe I would start to get some answers if I talked about it more. But what I'm finding, the more I talk about this with people such as yourself, the more I go, well, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I guess that could be. But I'll tell you this, ghosts, I still don't think that there are ghosts. I know, and I separate the two. I know that there is a spiritual realm out there. I have no doubt in my mind. Do I think that ghosts are out there walking around? No, I really don't. And I kind of wonder if it is a trickster element in a lot of the ghosts. Are they playing games with us? Are they trying to involve us? Then I meet you, right? And your view is so open, and the ghosts and spirits that you deal with are so believable, and they do everything from naughty stuff to good stuff. And so for me, I look at that and I say, well, maybe. But the one thing I do know is that we as humans are just a bunch of energy. That's what we are. And I think it is very possible that the energy that we send out can be so strong that it can last and repeat events that we've experienced, especially highly emotional events. I think it's possible that a person can imprint himself on things, such as dolls or beloved possessions or even houses, and they can imprint who they were on those premises. That, I believe, is entirely possible. But again, I think I'm a work in progress, to be honest.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's wonderful. Okay, so my take on the whole thing. I was raised religious, not Lutheran, Russian Orthodox. And we didn't really talk much in church about ghosts. I know there are some religions that are very adamant about there is no such thing as ghosts. There's heaven and hell, of course, but there's no such thing as ghosts. Our religion really didn't teach that. Our church didn't teach that. We kind of kept everything separate. I was enchanted with ghost stories when I was a kid. Ever since I was very small, I was fascinated with the idea that something that happened so long ago still had echoes into today. That's what my draw is. I love the history part of the ghost stories. So I do come to it with more of an open mind just because that's my background. I was allowed to read as much as I wanted to. I was allowed to devour these ghost stories. I was allowed to steep myself in all of these different attitudes towards the supernatural. And now that I'm grown up, now that I can go out to these places and experience these hauntings for myself, I'm finding that I'm even more open to it. I'm finding that first of all, I'm very, very fortunate in the fact that I have had a lot of encounters with spirits, and most of them have been positive. The vast majority of them have been positive. And I know for a fact that I'm very lucky about that. I'm very grateful for that. And I've spoken to enough psychic mediums in my investigative pursuits that I've come to, I still don't see dead people. I don't hear dead people. There are times I really wish I could. I'm told that that's not something to wish for, but I really wish I could because it would be fascinating to talk with these people. But I'm beginning to see the world and the invisible world in the way that these psychic mediums see it. I'm still not quite there yet, but I think I am getting a little more sensitive. I can walk into a house and I can kind of get a sense of the energy of a place. Not the individual spirits just yet, but kind of the energy. And I'm kind of getting off the topic. Jeanette wanted to know if we agreed on what ghosts and spirits were. I really believe that ghosts are energy that comes back to haunt a place. I consider ghosts to be stuck in a place. Ron, you mentioned a very powerful emotional event that can make a spirit stuck to a place or make a ghost stuck to a place and keep it trapped there. I believe that there are also spirits that have the ability to come and go as they please. A spirit is energy of a deceased person, just like a ghost, but a spirit has been released from this realm. It's not stuck anywhere. It's not haunting a certain place. It does come back to visit that place, but it also has that release of going to the other side. And I really honestly do believe, because I've been told this, and because it fits with my wishes, desires, I really believe that those of us that we have loved and have gone before are still around. They still come to visit. They still hang out with us. Even if we're not aware of them, they still pop in for visits once in a while just to check on how we're doing. And I'm, for the most part, not aware of that. I wish I was, but just the idea that that's a possibility gives me great comfort. And it gives me hope that when I pass over, I'll be able to do that for the ones I love. I can come back and visit people that I was close to when I was alive.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let me just say, to sum it up, in principle, it sounds like we agree. In principle.
I think So I think our opinions aren't that far different.
Well, Jeanette, I want to thank you for sending that in. I love having conversations like that because, like I said, I'm trying to figure this out, trying to understand, and trying to make a formula for what I think it's all about. I didn't start this podcast with even that goal. I started this podcast to present stories. And look, and here I am talking about ghosts and spirits. If you would have told me 8 years ago this is what I'd be doing on the podcast, I would have said, no, I'm going to have authors on and we're going to talk about stories. Well, you're an author and we are talking about stories, but a whole lot more. And I think that's okay.
I think that's wonderful.
Well, Sylvia, it's time to turn it over to Audible for a minute. Can you hang around for the Audible commercial?
You bet.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So, what am I listening to right now? 44 Years in Darkness, a true story of madness, tragedy, and shattered love, narrated by Kendall Steele. What makes this audiobook so special isn't just the story, but that it was written by our very own Sylvia Shults. Now, Sylvia, I know how excited you were when you heard that your book was being made into an audiobook. Tell us, what can we expect from 44 Years in Darkness?
Well, Ron, the story of Rhoda Derry is so powerful and so moving. Her story is one of the great tragedies of mental health care in Illinois, and it's also one of the great success stories of the Peoria State Hospital. It has a villain, it has tragedy, it has redemption. It's just a powerful story, and I'm so grateful to be able to share it with people. And you know what, Ron? I heard this from the publisher. The narrator of this book told the publisher that she broke down in tears a couple of times when she was reading it. It's that moving of a story.
That's incredible. Well, Sylvia, we can have Rhoda's story today. And here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. And you too can have 44 Years in Darkness. Thank you, Audible. Well, Sylvia, thanks for doing that. Do you have some stories for us this time?
Oh, Ron, do I ever. It is October. We are coming up on Halloween. So I'm going to get you back for that show you did a couple episodes ago, the thing on the floorboard. That story scared the paste out of me. If you want to know what's going to freak a ghost investigator out, that did it for me, Ron. I'm telling you what. So I'm going to get you back. Tonight, we are going to talk about haunted dolls.
Now, you knew that this is the one subject, and the listeners out there know that dolls creep me out. They always
creep me out, too. I'm not going to lie.
Well, but you didn't grow up with a mother that collects them.
No. Oh, you did.
I did.
Oh.
And our friend, Jason Dowd, he is a sensitive. Mm-hmm. I sent him pictures of most of my mom's collection, and he picked out two. And it happened to be two that creeped me out the most.
Really?
And he was pretty sure. Here's the weird part about that. One of the dolls that he picked out was a doll that had a really kind of a pretty blue dress on it. And he said to me, that is not her original dress. And I thought, oh, well, that can't be right. So I went to my mom and I said, is that the original dress on that doll? And she says, no, I got that at Value Village, which is a clothes recycling place here in town.
Uh-huh.
And so that's where I got that dress from. And I put it on her because the old one was rickety. And Jason says, she doesn't like that dress.
Wow.
Another one of those things that make you go, Now, we were talking about spirits just a little bit ago, and I want to point out that haunted dolls to me are different than ghosts and spirits. Would you agree with that?
I would. There's something really intriguing about haunted dolls because in contrast to other haunted objects like mirrors or beds or dressers or clocks, things like that, a haunted doll is the representation of a person. Maybe not a particular person, but it's representation of a human being. And that makes a haunted doll even creepier to us because it's got that connection, that mental connection of, oh, this is essentially a small human. So yeah, I think that really adds to the creep factor is the fact that this is a representation of us.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, I have no doubt that there's a spiritual world out there. And moreover, that spiritual world can spill into our own. So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch, I would think, for even that demon word to be involved in some of these doll huntings.
It would not surprise me.
Yeah, and they love to be tricksters. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I didn't mean to get us off subject, but if I didn't do it at least once on the podcast, I would not be myself. So
I love sharing stories, and part of that is people telling me stories.
All right. So let's get started with story number 1.
Okay. So the first story comes to us from Japan. The Japanese believe, what we were just talking about, that dolls actually have souls. They actually give old family dolls to priests when a family member passes away to have the dolls exorcised or burnt. They really believe that this is something that they need to do to take care of this possibility of the doll being haunted. Now, this story comes to us from the Manenji Temple at Sapporo on Hokkaido Island. They have in their possession a doll that is believed to be haunted. This doll is thought to be possessed by the soul of a young girl named Okiko Eikichi. She passed away in 1918. When she passed away, she had this doll in her possession, and the doll's hair was very short. Now, when Okiko passed away, her parents kept her clothing and her doll and everything, and just kept it in her memory. Shortly after the girl's death, the parents noticed that the doll's hair had started to grow. Now, Okiko passed away in 1918. By 1938, the haunted doll was given to Shinto priests at this Manenji temple. By that time, the doll's hair started off closely cropped to her head. By that time, and 20 years later, the doll's head hair had grown down to its knees.
Oh my gosh.
Now, every March 21st at the spring equinox, the priests actually give the doll a haircut, but the hair continues to grow several inches a year.
Okay.
I have chills going down my spine right now, I'll have you know.
Okay. So we have a physical manifestation with a doll that cannot be explained at all.
Yeah, at all.
Okay, Sylvia.
Now, since there's a date attached to that, that is going to be one of the stories in the upcoming book that I'm working on right now, which is A Ghost a Day, a ghost story for every day of the year. And that's going to be for March 21st. The
That
spring
makes
equinox.
sense.
Yeah.
All right. Story number 2.
Okay, so story number 2 comes to us from California. A woman named Charlene Weber bought a house in 1974. He bought a house in Bodega, California. It's a beautiful Victorian home, and she planned to open an antique shop and doll museum. So she had a little collection of dolls, and she started acquiring more. These dolls, this was a really premier collection that this woman had. They ranged from a half-inch tall to actual human-sized dolls. And the most bizarre doll in the collection was a life-size effigy of an 8-year-old girl who had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
As the child lay in her coffin, her parents had a death mask made of her face. And from this mask, an artist created an exact likeness of this girl's face and applied it to the head of a doll the size of an 8-year-old girl. And before her parents buried her, they cut off the little girl's long blonde hair and removed her eyelashes and eyebrows, and the artist put them on the doll's face. So this doll was an exact likeness of this little girl who had been lost to her parents, down to the fact that it was her hair and her eyebrows and her eyelashes on the doll.
You can't see it, but I'm sitting here shaking my head and saying, are people insane? Oh my word. Okay.
Yeah.
I can tell you one place you'll never find me is in a doll museum. Ever. And certainly one with life-sized little girl with real hair, eyebrows.
No I would not even walk in the door.
And using the death mask.
Yeah, so
couldn't they have done it at least when she was alive?
I don't know if the girl passed suddenly or if she had been ill for a while. I don't know that part of the story. So this doll was given to this collector, Charlene Weber, and the girl's parents had passed on. And when they passed on, it was sold and it joined Mrs. Weber's amazing collection. Now, one night, not long after she acquired this doll, Charlene was awakened by the sound of music coming from where she had stored the dolls, and then a loud crash. So this noise came from the second floor, so she followed the music up to the second floor. She wondered what had caused that crash. She found the floor of the room littered with broken glass. The effigy doll was in a glass case, and that glass had just exploded. So Charlene raced over to this doll that was lying on the floor, and she picked it up, and the doll had been crafted with a smile on its face, this perpetual smile. But as she picked it up, Charlene realized to her horror that the doll's expression had changed. Instead of a smile, the doll now wore an expression of incredible sadness.
Oh my word.
And even more disturbing, there was a tiny drop of moisture beneath one blue eye.
Oh, this is unfair.
So Charlene carefully put the doll on a chair for temporary display. She had to replace that case because the glass was just all over the place. So she set the doll up on a chair and she left the room. She just couldn't handle the weirdness anymore. So she left the room. She came back the next morning with a friend in tow. She wanted backup for this. And Charlene discovered that the doll was not where she had left it.
Oh, no.
It was standing in the middle of the room. And the sad expression of the previous night was gone. Once again, the face was just the face of a doll, except for the eyes. Those blue eyes were focused on Charlene and followed her every movement around the room.
Wow. Wow. So you really are trying to get me back for that story.
I told you.
Literally chills up and down my spine. And not only that, but we have another story to go.
We do. And this one's even creepier.
Oh, Sylvia. All right, Sylvia, let's get to the last story. And I believe you told me this one is called Marcel.
It is. This is the story called Marcel, and it concerns a gentleman that bought a house in Spokane, Washington. He didn't really like living alone. Well, who can blame him? Big empty house. So instead of getting a cat or a dog, like a normal person, he found a mannequin to keep him company. Mm-hmm. So since it was a mannequin, he decided to honor the mime Marcel Marceau, and he named this mannequin Marcel. And he dressed it in an army uniform. And he finished off this wardrobe of this mannequin by putting a pipe in its mouth and slamming a woman's wig on it. Just tricked this mannequin out, just having fun with it. And then Marcel was just placed in a place of honor in the living room for Scott's guests to admire. So one evening, Scott was working upstairs, and he heard the sound of a heavy object being dragged across the floor in the living room downstairs. And he knew he was alone in the house, except for Marcel. So he ran downstairs to investigate the noise, and he didn't find anyone that had broken into his house. There was no one else in the house besides him. And at first, Scott didn't notice anything out of the ordinary until he looked at Marcel. The mannequin was standing in its usual place, dressed in its army uniform. Now, though, its head was removed from its body and resting in its outstretched hands.
I'm not sure that's creepier than the little girl, but that's pretty creepy too. Dolls. Dolls. Well, Sylvia, that is 3 incredible stories.
I'm so delighted you enjoyed them, Ron.
Not my favorite subject, but yes, I enjoyed them. I really did. Those are 3 great stories.
Thank you.
And you always have such great stories. I have this picture of your desk just loaded with books.
Oh my God, yes.
And you just sitting there pouring through them and saying, oh, that's a story I'm going to remember. Oh, that one is good. I do have a question for you before. I know we're getting long here and we got to quit, but I do have to ask you, I don't think it's an accident that you're a librarian at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah, I work in a library simply to feed my addiction.
Tell us how you ended up becoming a librarian.
All right. Well, I'm delighted to do that. I have always loved books. My father tells me that I taught myself how to read when I was 2. I cannot remember a time before I learned how to read. I just can't remember back that far. I cannot remember being pre-literate. I've always adored books. I've always loved losing myself in stories. The very first job I had was in a library in LaGrange, in the town where I grew up outside Chicago. And actually, that library was haunted as well.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It was just in a nutshell, the LaGrange Library was built. It's on the corner of LaGrange Road and Cossett Avenue, and there was a house there at one time, and the house burned down in a fire, and a couple of children lost their lives in the fire. They're said to haunt the basement. And my sister also worked at that library, and she actually saw a shadow figure coming out of the elevator. So yeah, super haunted. And I have just worked in libraries ever since with a short foray into, you're going to laugh, a short foray into exotic dancing.
No, actually, you've told me that before, and it doesn't surprise me at all. Also, an avid motorcycle rider at one point.
Yes. I've quit riding the motorcycle because people have just gotten so crazy with their driving. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people run red lights just in the past 6 months. Mm-hmm. It's nutty. And I noticed I've talked to people at the library that come up and say, hey, you still riding your motorcycle? And I say no. And they're like, I gave up riding too, just because people are so crazy. I've spoken to a lot of people who have just given it up. Mm. It's sad, but...
So you've just always been in libraries then? There is no start or stop. It just started and never stopped.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by books all day, and they pay me to be there. I'm still pinching myself.
So I know you went to college. Did you get a degree in What did you get your degree in?
I did not get an MLS. I got my bachelor's degree in history. Big surprise there.
No,
I'm
not
sorry.
at all.
My bachelor's was in classics, and my master's was in history. So I do have a master's. It's just not in library science. It's in history.
And you've been a librarian for a really long time.
I've worked at the library I'm at now. I've worked there for 22 years.
Wow. Well, that's great, Sylvia. And, I have said this all along. I love librarians because I have never met one that didn't want to share what they knew.
Yeah.
And they
You've told
know
me stories about your library.
I have just good relationships with all the librarians, and they've been so helpful, and they love being helpful. And I think that it's not surprising to me that's what you've chosen to do.
Oh, thank you. That's a very high compliment. Thank you.
Well, Sylvia, what are you up to with your blog and Lights Out?
There are many more exciting editions of Lights Out on the way, and lots of fun little Today I Learned things on the blog. Of course, the most recent one was a delightful little fact that I learned about spiders.
Yeah.
There are some spiders.
I read that.
Yeah, I know you did, because you wrote a wonderful little ditty for me that I absolutely adored. There are some species of spiders that live in burrows, and they keep little tiny frogs as pets, because these wee froggies eat the insects that get into the spider's burrows that might attack the spider's eggs. So in a sense, you can say that these spiders keep these frogs as pets, kind of like cats being kept for mousers. I just thought that was fascinating. It
is, and I did. I wrote a little ditty for that. Shall I?
It was
read
wonderful. Please do.
I said, the itsy bitsy froggy climbed up the spider's leg. Down came the bugs to eat the mother's eggs. Out came the froggy and ate up all the bugs, and the itsy bitsy spider gave them all a hug.
I just love that.
Yeah, that was a spur of the moment thing. I see that I'm looking at it here on Facebook, and I see that there's a lot of people that thought it was pretty okay.
Good. So as far as Lights Out goes, there is an exciting episode coming up. They're all exciting. The next episode of Lights Out is going to be an actual ghost tour. I'm going to take you guys along with me on my ghost tour of Galena, Illinois.
With pictures, I heard.
Yes, with pictures.
That's going to be exciting. Yeah. Have you figured out the logistics on how you're going to do that?
I'm still working on it.
Well, the offer's out there. I can help you with that. I have some.
Thank you.
We can do that sometime. Well, yeah. Sylvia, the clock on the wall says we have done it. We have talked about everything on our little list here that we worked out together. How about that?
I am so pleased. We had so much fun doing it.
Yes, we did. So what have you got to say about Halloween to close this thing out?
Oh, go out, have fun, stay warm, drink lots of hot cider, get all the candy you can, and have fun dressing up. Be someone else for an evening.
I'm just going to go with Happy Halloween. Good night, Sylvia. I hope you get home okay. I'll call you an Uber.
Good night, Ron. It was an absolute pleasure.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We have one more story for today. It comes from Balen, New Mexico, and was sent in by Erica White. Erica calls her story The Cowboy Spirit. My parents live in a little community in Corrales, New Mexico. The houses were nice and newer, and most people have a horse or two. From the moment they moved in, they started having electrical issues. Bulbs were burning out daily, lights turning on and off, or their TV would just start changing channels by itself. So I fly in for my brother's wedding, and I decided that I would stay with my parents. As there is a lot of sand and dust there, the floors are all tile or hardwood, so they are easy to clean. Anyway, my parents own one horse, Sunny, who is super smart and was known for letting herself out of the main pen. At 3 a.m. my first night there, I wake up to the sound of cowboy boots on the hardwoods in the kitchen. It is a very distinct noise for those who've heard it before. I, for one, was used to it because we all wore cowboy boots to go out by the horses. So my mind instantly thinks that Sonny has gotten out of the pen again, and my dad is just washing up in the kitchen after corralling him. I rolled over and went back to sleep. During my morning coffee in the living room, my parents' dog was sitting next to me, and he suddenly stood up and ran down the hallway to the guest room. He started growling at the door, and I jumped up because my little brother was still sleeping back there, and I didn't want the dog to wake him. The dog's fur was standing up on the back of his neck, and he let out a low growl. When I got to him, I saw a man in what would be described as cowboy gear walking into the bathroom and then disappearing. The dog instantly looked at me and started wagging his tail, proud of himself for scaring it off. My little brother woke up shortly after, and I didn't see my parents until later at the rehearsal dinner, so I didn't get the chance to mention any of this to them on that day. When we got back to the house, everyone was tired, so we went to bed. At 2 a.m., I hear someone call my name from the hallway, then I hear the boots on the tile retreating to the kitchen area. From there, it's a constant pacing sound in the kitchen. At first, I was getting a little freaked out, but I always talked myself down from worry and chalked it up to my dad again. Once I'm awake, it takes me some time to get back to sleep, so I figured I'd give my dad some company since he obviously can't sleep. I get up and start walking down the hallway. I round the corner and the kitchen is pitch black, as is the entire rest of the house, and then the noise suddenly stops. So I flipped on the light closest to me. After a minute or two, my dad comes down the hallway to investigate the light being on. He sees me up and asks, "Why am I awake?" I tell him about the boots and the dog and the morning before. He said that their dog always growls and barks down that hallway, and that my mom has heard the boots as well. About a year later, I was back at the house and staying with my parents again. I heard the boots, so I walked out into the dark kitchen and just said out loud that I don't appreciate being woke up each time I stayed there, and to please refrain from walking all around the house at night. I never heard the boots again. My parents lived in that house for another few years. My dad believes that the sounds were my grandpa's spirit. Erica White, Balin, New Mexico. Very cool story, Erica. I love the strangeness of it all. Also, so very brave of you to confront your ghosts. I'm not sure I would be able to do that. Thank you for sharing your story. Click to close because this podcast is done. I want to thank Tom Williams, Sylvia Shults, everyone who sent in contest submissions, and of course, Erica White. Without you, we would not have had a show. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to Ron's Amazing Stories. There you will find an amazing number of links that should fit every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This is what makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.